Spain for 35 years. I come from a place called Ludlow in Shropshire. I don't know if anyone's from Shropshire out there.
Anyone from Shropshire?
I've been living here for so I said 35 years. I worked for the British Council. I worked in a Spanish university, Alcalá de Henares. I've worked for a long time writing educational books for Pearson Education, and I've also written a few novels. I've published a novel in Spanish. I'm working on one in English at the moment.
Now, we are hearing apparently Laura, no sound. Have we got some sound now? Yes, okay, so sorry about that. And for people who have just tuned in, or people who are watching, we had no sound. Yes, now, says Moshan, thank you. So now you can hear us. I'll just very briefly restate what I've just been explaining. We're here with Michael Harris from the Eurocitizens group, which is campaigning in favour of rights for British people living in Spain, Spanish people living in the UK, during and after the Brexit process. So today the subject is Brexit. It's a subject that has a lot of people concerned who are living here, worried about their rights. Michael was just explaining where he's from, what he does. Hopefully you caught that with the sound. So Michael, tell us about the Eurocitizens group. How did it come about and how did you get involved in it?
Well, I mean, we started off, it happened, I mean, after the referendum in June, we started communicating with various people I know around here in the Madrid area, thinking about what are we going to do. And it was left over the summer, and then in September we had a meeting with 5 people to say, well, what can we actually do about this, and what do we, what's the best tactic? Because obviously our rights, our futures have suddenly changed overnight. Because before the 23rd of June we thought, well, we're European citizens, we don't need to get Spanish nationality, everything is fine. Now, the situation afterwards changed because our rights, our futures are under threat in terms of our legal position in this country. And the same is true for all Britons in Europe, the European Union. Anyway, so we did this and we thought, well, what we want to do is we're not going to campaign about Brexit. That's not we're not trying to campaign to change Brexit. That's not our issue. Our issue is to worry about people. Because one of the issues that comes out is that everyone's, there's a lot of talk in the press with politicians about the economy, about, customs and the single market, all these things.
Trade, basically.
Exactly.
Focusing on trade.
Yeah, but people don't talk about us. They don't talk about British citizens in the European Union. And they don't, they're beginning to talk about European citizens in Britain more, which is great, but we're still forgotten. And I think that's a real problem because, where the British government and British politicians really just don't worry about us very much. Firstly, we can't vote, as most of you know. If you've lived outside Britain for more than 15 years, well, you don't have a vote. So,
and that's, we should just point out that's not just in the referendum that people who long-timers weren't able to vote, but also in elections, in general elections in the UK.
Exactly, and that means that we're not, if you don't vote for a politician, you're not really very important. The second thing is the kind of stereotypes about us. Because in Britain, people hold a lot of stereotypes about Britons in Europe. The idea that they have, and this comes out in photos, even in newspapers like The Guardian, where there's some interesting content, but the photo is the typical, wealthy, retired couple sitting around a swimming pool drinking gin and tonics. I don't know how many of out there are around a swimming pool drinking gin and tonics. I think probably very few of you. And that is very bad for us. It's fine. It's not a matter of it's the matter that because of that, people think, well, it's okay for you. You're lucky. You've escaped the country. You're wealthy, and you're basically on holiday. Now, most of us in this country and most of us throughout Europe are not on holiday. We're working people. We've been working for a long time. And if people are pensioners and they've saved up money and come here, well, that's great too. And there's this kind of, it's a slur on Britons. And it enables the British government to ignore us, to forget about us. Well, it's only a few people, rich people trying to get away from tax. That's another myth. Tax in this country is higher than it is in Britain, so we're not avoiding tax. That's so. All of this enables politicians and the British government to forget about us. You know, we've written to the David Davis, a whole lot of groups of Britons in Europe.
David Davis is the Brexit minister, is that correct? Yeah.
And we've had no reply. 2 weeks ago, there was a commission, a parliamentary committee from Westminster came to visit Spain. We tried to get in touch to meet them. They were busy with dealing with trade issues. You know, people are the people getting forgotten in this process.
Laura, we're still getting... Have we got sound problems still? No? Okay, cool. Okay, so sorry, apologies if you had problems hearing us at the start of the broadcast. If you've just joined us, or if you can just hear us now, I'm here with Michael Harris from the Eurocitizens group, which is a group campaigning in favour of rights for Britons living in Spain and Spaniards living in the UK during and after the Brexit process. Now, you mentioned the gin and tonics there, Michael. The stereotype about Brits abroad, Brits in Spain, particularly lounging by their pools, drinking gin and tonics. Last night, Eurocitizens organised a round-table discussion at the offices of the European Parliament in Madrid, and the subject of gin tonics came up quite a lot. This was a kind of repeated theme about how politicians, or how the general public perhaps in the UK, view expats in Spain. But that was just one point among a host of very interesting points that were made last night. Can you tell us a bit about the event, how that event came about, who was there, and what are the main conclusions that we can draw from what we saw last night?
Well, the round table we organised last night was about the impact of Brexit on citizens. And again, I keep on repeating this because it's the people who matter. And as I said, a lot of stuff has been done about trade, other issues, but very little on this. So we invited a series of Spanish politicians, experts in different areas like law, like health, like education. We also invited a colleague of the Españoles en el Reino Unido, the Spanish group who we work with, Vanessa López Roman, to come over as well.
Yeah,
so
really interesting.
She could give the point of view of the Spanish people living in Britain, as well as our point of view living here. We had the first politician we had was José Montilla, who's a top-level Spanish politician.
He's currently a socialist senator.
That's right. Yeah, and he's on the committee for the European Union and the committee for Brexit. And the other guy we had was a guy called Enrique Guerrero, who is an MEP, and he's vice president of the Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats in the European Union. So another guy who's important. And both of them were, expressed their concern about the position of citizens in the negotiations, and about and they expressed their willingness to help, which is good news,
Absolutely. Yeah, and it was an interesting, again, going against that gin and tonic stereotype, there was a very interesting collection of people. There were a lot of journalists there. There were journalists, UK journalists based in Spain. There were a lot of citizens, a lot of professionals, some people who looked like they were retirees but had obviously lived here for a long time. It was there certainly were, certainly that bucks the trend and the stereotype of the typical Brit abroad. I guess when people think of Brits abroad, it's like you say, they think of people sunning themselves on the coast. Thank you very much. We've got some comments from Barbara Leonard, who's asking who is attending the demo in London on the 25th of March. I mean, there's talk about doing a march in Spain, I believe.
We'll think about it. I mean, we need to see, it takes an awful lot of work to organise everything, and we'll see what we can do. I mean, the alternative, if we can't do something here, is to go to London. That's a great thing. I mean, going to London, there's another thing in Rome as well. But, I think it's important. I think it's important to kind of stand up for Europe in lots of ways, because Europe's been blamed in Britain and in other countries for all the problems. I mean, when anything good happens, the national government takes the credit, and when anything bad happens, it's Europe. And actually, you forget what Europe gives us in terms of stability, in terms of citizenship. It enables people to study, to work, to travel, to live abroad, and that is something that People, it's not about just cheap flights and things like that, though that's also included. But this ability to move around and have this flexibility is really important for people.
Absolutely. Although, I mean, you mentioned the cheap flights thing. I read an article, I believe, in The Guardian this morning talking about how EasyJet and Ryanair specifically are very, very concerned about what's going to happen after Brexit. I mean, one of the things for me living here personally is that fact that you can grab a €50 flight and pop back. I go back to the UK maybe 6-8 times a year, and if that were to disappear, then the ties with your family would suffer. I mean, that for me on a personal point of view is pretty terrifying. Thank you, Linda, for your questions. She says the main question has to be for me: do I keep health cover? As pensioners, my husband and I have existing medical problems, and if we had to pay astronomical private health insurance, this could force us back to the UK. Do you want to weigh in on that, Michael?
Yeah, we had last night, one of our experts was a guy called Agustín Reollo, and Agustín is an expert, he's a doctor and he's an expert in health for Comisiones Obreras, which is a Spanish union. And he answered that question. Now, he said that he analysed the population of British people living in Spain. As I said, it's about 300,000. Firstly, he said, the UK pensioners and the people who've worked or their dependents in this country, and he looked at the different groups. Now, and he said, well, if Britain leaves the European Union without an agreement, there is going to be a problem for UK pensioners, because the agreement for the reciprocal arrangements of health depend on the EU. So that will have to be worked out. But either if there's no agreement with the EU, it'll have to be worked out on a bilateral basis. Now, that doesn't mean it's not going to happen, but we've got to put pressure on our government, our politicians, to make sure that they're clear about it and that this gets sorted out now. We're not going to wait. We don't want to wait another 2 years to know what's going to happen. People who are living and depend on this need to know now. That's why the first thing, as soon as Article 50 is activated, the first thing that should happen would be talking about these issues. And, because it's going to be very difficult for people to get private health insurance if they're over a certain age, if they have certain illnesses, and it's going to be very difficult. And that is a huge problem, and it's got to be dealt with. We've got time, but we need to put pressure on.
If you've just joined us, we are discussing Brexit with Michael Harris from the Eurocitizens group, which is campaigning for the rights of Britons in Spain and Spaniards in the UK during and after the Brexit process. I'm just going to say a few words in Spanish as well. Si nos estáis viendo y no habláis inglés, si queréis mandaros una pregunta en español, contestaremos. Nieves dice ni papa, justo cuando estoy hablando en castellano. Lo siento, Nieves, que estamos aquí haciendo este directo en inglés. Pero si quieres mandar una pregunta sobre Brexit en español, vamos a contestar en castellano. Thank you to Silvia, who sends saludos from Montevideo in Uruguay, and Penny Miller, she says she's watching from Frigiliana. I'm not sure where that is. Frigiliana.
It's in Malaga.
Oh, there we go, in Malaga. Thank you, Michael. She says, totally agree. We are not rich. We contribute to the Spanish economy by spending all our pensions on rent, food, utilities, thereby supporting Spain and its economy. We have not utilised any healthcare as our lifestyle gives us great health, so are not any drain on the Spanish system. 2 points. I mean, one is that what you were alluding to there, which was mentioned a lot during the round table last night, is that limbo that people feel that they are in during this process, and this is going to be a long, drawn-out process. But also, perhaps the sheer scale of this issue, in particular in terms of Spain and the UK, and the amount of citizens living in each other's countries. I mean, perhaps that could give us a reason to be hopeful from a certain point of view, because it's such a huge. What are the figures? How many?
There are about 100,000 Spanish people living in Britain, and there are about 300,000 British people living in Spain. But these figures are very, very inaccurate in the way, because a lot of people don't register.
Sure.
And one of the most important things, and that's what the guy from the embassy said last night, is that if you're in this country and you're not registered, get registered, because you can't get your rights unless you're registered, unless you're involved, you're actually here, firstly with your town hall and also in the Registro de Extranjería.
Yeah.
And that's very important.
It's a real pain. Anyone who's tried to apply for those things knows that it's kind of a real tricky bureaucracy, especially if you don't speak Spanish, but it's really important to do. There's plenty of websites where you can search for help and advice. In fact, we've had a message from Myra Cecilia Azzopardi from the Citizens Advice Bureau in Spain. That's a very good page and website on Facebook, which is dealing with all kinds of issues that expats, especially those who are new or don't speak the language, might have to deal with. Maria, thank you for your comment. She says, do you fear that pensioners could get their pensions frozen if they live in Spain? I believe I've read something about this on the website already.
I mean, that's the situation. At the moment, there is an automatic, within the European Union, there's an automatic update arrangement so that when the British government increases the pension along with inflation in Britain, this happens to all pensioners, UK pensioners living in the European Union. The same doesn't happen to people living outside the European Union in a lot of countries. And that obviously is very important, because if you don't get your pension updated over a very quick period of time, your pension is eroded. And that's something that the British government could do unilaterally now. They don't need to wait for any negotiations. They can actually put a lot of people's minds at rest by actually saying, well, okay, we're prepared to update UK pensioners' pensions for European residents, and it's something they can do, and they should do it. So get in touch with your MP, do so, and tell them, look, the politicians need to do this. They can't just blame everything on the negotiations. It's out of our control. It's important to see that we have to be realistic. We can't be over pessimistic, but we have to realise that the situation, we're just about to go into some very difficult negotiations. Theresa May very clearly said that no deal is better than a bad deal. Yeah. Well, no deal for us is actually walking off a cliff.
Yes, it's terrifying.
And that's no good at all. Yeah. She also says that she guarantees the rights of EU citizens in Britain. Well, she said that, but we don't want words from politicians. We want actions, and that's the thing. As I said, as citizens, as British citizens in this country, as European citizens, Spanish citizens in Britain, we are political footballs, we're bargaining chips, and that can't go on. If
you've just joined us, we're talking about Brexit with Michael Harris from Eurocitizens Group. We're going to take a question in Spanish now, so we're going to switch into Spanish. Gracias, Paco, por tu comentario. Lo siento que no entiendes nada, pero estamos haciendo esto mayormente en inglés, hablando de Brexit, pero ahora vamos a tratar de una pregunta que nos ha llegado en español. Mateo pregunta, ¿será más difícil cursar estudios universitarios en el Reino Unido tras el Brexit? Anoche, en una reunión, en una charla que organizaron estos de Eurocitizens, se trató de este tema. ¿Quieres comentarlo?
Sí, tuvimos un experto, el experto que trató temas de educación, Robert Robinson, que es de la Universidad de Comillas, comentó este tema. Dice que por ejemplo, que hasta el 2018, hasta el año que viene, sigue en curso, por ejemplo, el programa Erasmus. A nivel de estudios de españoles o británicos residentes en España, cuando el Reino Unido sale de la Unión Europea, la situación a nivel de las tasas para pagar para la universidad cambiará. En este momento los residentes españoles y los británicos pagan lo mismo que la gente en el Reino Unido. Los no comunitarios, la gente que vive fuera de la Unión Europea, paga como el triple. Hay un caso, por ejemplo, que cuánto cuesta estudiar química en la Universidad de Londres, y para un comunitario son 10.000 euros, y para un no comunitario son 30.000. Entonces ese es un problemón. Es un problemón para los españoles que quieren estudiar, es un problema para los hijos de los británicos que viven aquí y también es un problema para las universidades británicas porque afectará mucho la gente, los alumnos que van a ingresar en las universidades.
Vale, pues vamos a ya cambiar a hablar en inglés. Si tenéis más preguntas en castellano, no dudéis en mandárnoslas debajo del vídeo comentando aquí en Facebook. So, let's switch back, Michael, and I wanted to ask you a question about voting rights, which is something that came up last night, which I thought was really interesting. We've touched on the fact that we're not going to be able to, you know, that as Britons, we can't vote after we've been living here for 15 years or more, but there were some other interesting points that came up last night about voting in municipal elections and also voting in European elections. Do you want to explain?
I mean, Enrique Guerrero, the MEP, talked about this. He said that, I mean, at the moment, as a lot of people are probably aware, as a United Kingdom's national living in the European Union, we can vote in the municipal elections, the local elections, and the European elections. Now, when Britain leaves the European Union, that will change. We won't have any voting rights at all, unless Britain and Spain set up reciprocal voting rights. So basically we'll be completely disenfranchised. At the moment we're half disenfranchised because we can only vote in half the elections, and we can't vote in Britain. But this will mean complete disenfranchisement of British nationals in Europe, which is scandalous, really. I mean, Enrique Guerrero was quite funny. He said, well, you know, bringing back no taxation without representation.
Yeah.
Going backwards, basically, to before 1775.
And on that topic, what are the main concerns that people are conveying to you since you've set up the group? What are the worries of the people here?
Well, I mean, I think Linda mentioned health, and that is a key problem for, you know, a lot of people. There are other things as well, like work, and this isn't just to do with work permits. You can have a work permit, but unless you have full European citizenship, you know, unless you have the qualifications that are recognised in different countries, professionals who can work as architects or doctors or whatever in a different place, well, that means that a work permit's pretty useless. So that's one of the issues. The other one is business. You know, there are a lot of people, a lot of very hard-working Britons in this country who have set up their own business, who are working very hard. You know, will they have the same ability to do this after Brexit? More, you can carry on, really. We mentioned the issue of pensions. The other issue with pensions is whether you can aggregate your pension. Now, if you've worked, say, in Britain and in Italy and then in Spain, at the moment there's a current system within the European Union which means that you can put all this together and you can get your pension from different countries. Now, you know, when Britain leaves the European Union, that will disappear. All of these are reasons to put pressure on our politicians. Education, we talked about that as well, about you know, the fact of education in universities in Britain will suddenly become much more expensive. I mean, there might be problems also for British schools. There are a lot of British schools in this country, and a lot of British people send their children there. They'll be under threat as well in the terms of, you know, getting teachers is going to be much more difficult, and the whole thing is going to change. So I mean, those are a series of things. Property, what's going to happen about property? Will we have to pay more tax as non-Europeans? You know, family things as well. You know, I mean, there's divorce. We didn't go into them in detail because this is very complex. I mean, the lawyers said that the lawyers, Ralph Smith, on the panel last night, said that, well, this depends on a one-by-one basis. You know, you can't actually generalise. But there's a whole raft of law that runs our lives. And this kind of, this has been going on since 1973, you know, when I was 17. And you know, you were probably very young.
I wasn't even born.
Exactly, there you are. So, you know, this has been going on for so long, so all this legislation, if it disappears, is going to cause a real problem for us, really.
Excellent. Okay, right, well I think we shall wind it up there. I think we're pretty much out of time. Thank you ever so much, Michael, for coming in to see us.
Well, thank you very much, Simon, for inviting me along and you know, letting us speak about these things which affect so many people.
Definitely. Thank you all very much for watching. We will be discussing Brexit again many times in these Facebook Live broadcasts. So you can get in touch with us if you have specific questions, or if you'd like a particular person or figure, a lawyer for example, or anyone that you can think of who would like to come in and you'd like to see come in and talk about Brexit as this process carries on. You can get in touch with us via the Facebook page. I'd also like to recommend that you follow Eurocitizens on Facebook and on Twitter. You can find their webpage as well, because they are posting lots of interesting articles and information, and of course organising events like the one held in Madrid last night. There's other groups as well that you will be able to find on the social networks located around different parts of Spain, which are all working towards the same thing, which is fighting for the rights of Brits in Spain and Spaniards in the UK as we go through this Brexit process. So we'll be back for a couple of, probably in a week or maybe a couple of weeks with another live broadcast. So until then, thanks ever so much for watching, and we shall see you very soon.